I still remember the echo of his laughter. The room was glass-walled, high above the city, with the skyline stretching endlessly. For people sat in front of me, all in sharp suits, all polished, all carrying the weight of wealth and power. I stood there in my simple red t-shirt and my worn-out blue backpack, holding nothing but a folder of papers that told only half of my story. The man in the middle, the one with the silver hair and commanding presence, leaned back in his chair. His laughter filled the room so loud that even the woman beside him couldn't help but smile. "Did you even look at yourself in the mirror before walking in here?" he said mockingly, his voice dripping with arrogance. "This is not a place for schoolgirls with backpacks. This is a place for professionals. Do you know how many people fight to sit in this very chair you're standing in front of?" The others chuckled politely, and I could feel their eyes piercing me, measuring me, dismissing me. For a moment, my throat tightened. The humiliation burned hot in my chest. I wanted to run, just like I had so many times before when people belittled me for being different, for being simple, for not belonging. But this time was different. This was my chance. I steadied my breath. I looked straight into his eyes, refusing to let my fear control me. And with a calm, steady voice, I said the words that froze his smile for the first time that morning. "I know 9 languages." The room fell silent. The laughter stopped. The millionaire, still leaning back in his chair, blinked as if he hadn't heard me right. The smirk on his lips faltered, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his confident eyes. His stare lingered on me, but I didn't look away. I repeated softly but firmly, "Yes, 9 languages." The woman on the panel raised her eyebrows. One of the younger men actually leaned forward, curiosity replacing the mocking smile he wore a moment ago. For a second, the room belonged to me, but what they didn't know was that every word, every language I had learned, carried a story. A story they would never guess by looking at a girl in a red t-shirt with a backpack. I grew up in a neighborhood where dreams usually died before they had a chance to take flight. My father worked 2 jobs, my mother stitched clothes late into the night, and we barely made enough to survive. But in the middle of all that hardship, I found my escape, an old library near the train station. That library was where I first touched a Russian grammar book, its pages yellow and torn. I didn't even understand the alphabet at first, but I traced the letters again and again until they felt familiar. Then came Spanish, when I befriended an immigrant woman who sold fruits at the corner market. She would laugh as I tried to copy her accent, correcting me gently. Little did she know she was teaching me more than just words. She was teaching me connection. Arabic came from a neighbor who prayed loudly every morning, his verses filling the street. I was curious, so he began teaching me. French I picked up from discarded magazines. Mandarin from late-night online lessons I took on a borrowed laptop that barely worked. German, Italian, Hindi, Turkish, each language was like a hidden treasure I dug out of the chaos of poverty. Every language became a bridge, and every bridge was a promise to myself. One day, I will not just belong in a room like this, I will own it. As I stood in front of the millionaire and his panel, their silence was proof enough. They were beginning to realize I wasn't the ordinary girl they had assumed. But I hadn't even told them yet why I had learned 9 languages. That part would shock them even more. The man who had laughed at me leaned forward now, elbows resting on the polished wooden table. His expression had shifted, no longer amusement, but something closer to doubt. Maybe even intrigue. 9 languages? He repeated, his voice quieter. Why would a girl like you need 9? For a second, his words stung. A girl like you. I had heard that line so many times in my life, but instead of shrinking under it, I stood taller. Because where I come from, I said steadily. Words were the only weapon I had. Their eyes fixed on me, the sound of the city outside muffled by the thick glass. I took a breath and let my truth flow. When my father lost his job, I had to work in a small tourist cafe. Customers came from everywhere: Russia, Spain, France, China. Most workers just served food. But I listened. I tried to answer in their language. I made mistakes, I embarrassed myself, but I kept going. And soon, they remembered me. Not for the coffee, not for the food, but for making them feel at home. The woman on the panel gave a faint nod, as though she understood. I continued. Later, when my mother got sick, I translated medical instructions for her from books in English that no one else could read. When my little brother got into trouble, I convinced the police officer to give him another chance, because I could speak his tongue. And when a neighbor's child was lost, I calmed him in Italian until we found his parents. I paused, clutching the strap of my backpack. Each language was not just knowledge. It was survival. It was dignity. It was power. And I promised myself, if I can give a voice to people who feel unheard, then no one can laugh at me for being small or poor or ordinary. The room was silent again, but it was a different silence now. Not the silence of mockery, the silence of being impressed. The millionaire's fingers drummed on the table. His eyes narrowed, not in arrogance, but in calculation, as if remeasuring me. For the first time, I saw the laughter in him replaced with something I couldn't quite name. Respect or fear. The silence didn't last long. The millionaire leaned back again, but this time his laughter didn't return. Instead, he snapped his fingers. One of his assistants hurried forward with a sleek tablet. Impressive speech, he said coldly. But words are cheap, girl. Anyone can claim to know 9 languages. He tapped the tablet, and within seconds, a video call appeared on the giant screen behind him. On the screen, 3 faces popped up. A businessman from Russia, a woman from France, and an older man from China. They were partners of his company. I could tell from the urgency in their tones. He turned to me, his eyes sharp. Translate. Live. Right now. No mistakes. The room stirred. Even the panelists looked surprised. It wasn't just a test. It was a trap. If I stumbled even once, they would all laugh again, and I'd be thrown out humiliated. My palms were sweating. My heart raced. But then, I remembered why I was here. Why I had spent years listening, repeating, struggling, while others mocked me. I didn't learn languages to impress rich men. I learned them to help people. The Russian man spoke first, quickly, angrily. I caught his words and turned them into clear English for the millionaire. He says the shipment delay is costing him millions, and he demands immediate action. Before they could react, the French woman cut in, her tone urgent. She says the French market cannot accept late arrivals. It will destroy their trust. I translated smoothly. Then came the older Chinese man. His dialect was heavy, his words full of nuance. I took a breath, listened carefully, and translated with precision. He says if your company doesn't keep its word, he will cut ties completely. But he is willing to listen, if there is proof of commitment. The room held its breath. Every word I spoke was like a stone dropping into still water. No hesitation, no stutter. When the call ended, silence wrapped the room once more. The assistants stared at me. The woman on the panel's lips parted in disbelief. And the millionaire? For the first time, he didn't laugh. He froze, his jaw clenched, his eyes locked on me like he was seeing me for the very first time. Impossible, he muttered under his breath. But it wasn't impossible. It was me. For a long moment, the millionaire didn't move. The man who had filled the room with mocking laughter just minutes ago now sat frozen, his hands still resting on the table, his sharp eyes locked on me. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice low. "Who taught you?" I smiled faintly. "Life," I replied. "And people who didn't think I was worth laughing at." The panel shifted uncomfortably. The woman on the left glanced at the millionaire, waiting for his reaction. The younger man actually looked impressed, as if he had just witnessed something extraordinary. The millionaire rubbed his chin, deep in thought. Then he said something none of them expected. "Do you know what you just did, girl? That call you translated wasn't a test. It was real. Those were my partners. And you may have just saved me millions." Gasps rippled across the panel. The assistant who had handed him the tablet lowered his eyes, embarrassed. The millionaire's gaze softened, though his tone still carried authority. "You took anger and turned it into clarity. You turned threats into negotiation. And you did it faster than any so-called professional interpreter I've paid before. Do you realize the value of that?" I tightened my grip on my backpack strap. "I didn't do it for value," I said quietly. "I did it because people deserve to be understood. Too many voices get lost because nobody listens carefully enough." The woman on the panel leaned forward, smiling now. "She's right. This isn't just about translation. It's about connection." The millionaire exhaled slowly, studying me with new eyes. There was no laughter left in him, only silence, only thought. Then, almost reluctantly, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You've surprised me," he admitted. "I thought you were just another dreamer, a girl playing dress-up in a world too big for her. But now, I see I was wrong." The others nodded. Respect had entered the room where mockery once stood. And for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of all those long nights, all the ridicule, all the practice, finally turning into something undeniable. The laughter that once tried to break me had transformed into respect that lifted me. But what came next was even more shocking, because the millionaire wasn't just impressed. He had a decision to make. Days after the gala, Walton couldn't stop thinking about Sanjana. For years, he had measured people only in terms of deals, profits, and contracts. But she was different. She had nothing. Yet she had everything that really mattered: intelligence, resilience, and dignity. He invited her once again, this time not to a party but to his office. She walked in wearing the same simple red dress she had worn at the gala, her eyes carrying both shyness and strength. "Sanjana," Walton began softly, "do you know why I couldn't stop laughing that night before I froze in shock?" She tilted her head, curious. "Because you thought I was pretending?" He shook his head. "Because I realized that in all my life, with all my money, I could never buy what you have: knowledge, perseverance, humility. That's when I knew you were someone I couldn't afford to lose." Her lips parted slightly, surprised. "Mr. Walton." But he stopped her gently. "No, call me Walton. From now on, you're not just a translator, not just a girl who knows 9 languages. You're my partner, not just in business, but, if you'll allow it, in life." Her eyes glistened, her heart thundering in her chest. She had lived years with people dismissing her, overlooking her, underestimating her. Yet here, standing before her, was the most powerful man she had ever met, offering her the one thing she never thought she'd find: respect. Silence hung in the air before she finally whispered, "Yes, I would like that." Walton smiled, for the first time not as a millionaire, but as a man who had found something more precious than wealth. Together, they walked out of his office, not as employer and employee, but as equals, 2 souls who had crossed worlds and languages to find each other. And from that day, people no longer laughed when she proudly said, "I know 9 languages." They listened, they admired, and they respected her. For the girl who had once been dismissed had become the woman who forever changed a millionaire's life.